Good morning. Here is your global news report for April 10, 2026. International affairs are increasingly unstable, centered on the escalating conflict and fragile ceasefire in the Middle East, with the security of the Strait of Hormuz being a primary concern. Concurrently, President Trump's criticism of NATO and Russia's strategic military activities are generating geopolitical tensions. These unstable elements are having widespread economic impacts, including the IMF's downward revision of global economic forecasts, disruptions in energy and financial markets, and the vulnerability of fertilizer supply chains, casting a dark shadow over the global economy. In the Middle East, the ceasefire agreement between the United States and Iran has been destabilized by Israel's continued attacks on Lebanon, resulting in hundreds of casualties. Iran has released mind maps of the Strait of Hormuz and intensified transit restrictions, while Japan is considering an additional release of oil reserves. Israel is proceeding with settlement approvals and has rejected Iran's demand to halt uranium enrichment. NATO's future is under discussion due to President Trump's suggestions of leaving the alliance and his criticism of non-cooperation in the war against Iran. Meanwhile, the British Navy announced that Russian submarines were surveying undersea cables in the North Atlantic, and Russian warships escorted a tanker in the English Channel, increasing tensions between Russia's strategic military activities in Western countries. The instability in the Middle East is having a severe impact on the global economy through transit risks in the Strait of Hormuz, leading the IMF to revise its global economic forecast downward. The surge in crude oil and raw material prices is leading to business contractions and price increases for consumer goods. Particularly in South America, the vulnerability of fertilizer supply has been exposed. Japan is reallocating Middle East investments and considering an additional release of oil reserves. Next, here are the key stories from the US. While negotiations for a ceasefire with Iran are facing difficulties and President Trump is reconsidering NATO's role, domestic issues concerning the use of AI in the legal field are emerging. The two-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran began in an unstable situation, with Iran's oil refining facilities being attacked and 5 Gulf Arab countries reportedly attacked by Iranian drones and missiles. President Trump also stated that U.S. troops deployed in the Middle East would stay. After a meeting with the NATO Secretary General where he made remarks belittling the alliance, President Trump suggested the possibility of the U.S. withdrawing from NATO if some NATO member states do not cooperate in reopening the Strait of Hormuz. In the U.S. legal community, as the use of artificial intelligence, AI, expands, a case was reported in the Nebraska Supreme Court where a lawyer submitted a brief containing fictitious citations and precedents, highlighting issues associated with AI usage. Next, here are the key stories from Europe. In the UK, strong stances on international affairs are being shown, with calls for sanctions against Israel and the termination of trade agreements. In the Netherlands, an innovative rainwater storage fence is being introduced as a climate change measure, while financial markets saw temporary relief following the announcement of a ceasefire in Iran. The UK's Green Party has demanded the government to abrogate the UK-Israel trade agreement, ban the use of UK airspace by the United States, and impose sanctions on Israel following Israel's attacks on Lebanon. The Dutch Housing Corporation has begun installing rain fences in homes in Veldhoven, capable of storing up to 2,160 liters of rainwater, aiming to reduce drainage pressure during heavy rainfall and utilize water during droughts. Following the announcement of a two-week ceasefire in the Iran war, financial markets saw a drop in crude oil prices and a recovery in stock prices, temporarily easing concerns about global oil and gas supply through the Strait of Hormuz. Next, here are the key stories from the Middle East. Despite the ceasefire agreement between the United States and Iran, Israel's attacks on Lebanon have intensified, causing numerous casualties. The World Bank has significantly revised its economic growth forecast for the Middle East downward, and tensions in the Strait of Hormuz are also rising. The United States announced a two-week ceasefire agreement with Iran, but Israel intensified its attacks on Lebanon, resulting in at least 254 deaths and over 1,000 injuries on Wednesday. The U.S. and Israel claim that Lebanon is not included in this ceasefire. The World Bank has significantly lowered its GDP growth forecast for the Middle East in 2026 from 3.6% in January to 1.8%, citing factors such as the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, destruction of energy and public infrastructure, market disruptions, and financial volatility. Iran's semi-official news agency published a diagram suggesting the possibility of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, a military organization, planting mines in the Strait of Hormuz. This could be pressure on the United States during unstable ceasefire negotiations, and Gulf states are concerned about Iran's influence over this strategic maritime passage. Next, here are the key stories from Russia. Pressure on civil society is intensifying, with the arrest of a former journalist and the designation of the human rights group Memorial as extremist. The economy is seeing a sharp increase in budget deficit, while exchanges of bodies with Ukraine, drone attacks, and tracking of submarines by the British Navy were also reported. Russia's FSB arrested a former Radio Free Europe/Radio Liberty journalist, 65, Alexander Andreev, in the Far East's Sabakalsky Krai on charges of treason, suspected of providing information to aid Ukrainian cyber attacks. Russia's Supreme Court designated the Nobel Prize-winning human rights group Memorial as an extremist organization, effectively criminalizing its remaining activities. The Moscow editorial office of the independent newspaper Novaya Gazeta also faced a police raid. Russia's federal budget deficit reached 4.6 trillion rubles, approximately $58.8 billion, in the first quarter of 2026, exceeding the annual target of 3.8 trillion rubles in just 3 months. A 45% decrease in energy tax revenue and a 17% increase in government spending are the main causes. Next, here are the key stories from China. China is strongly promoting technological innovation and economic growth, including a dramatic expansion of battery production capacity and the advancement of an AI-driven smart economy. Simultaneously, it is seeking to increase the bond issuance ceiling for infrastructure development in Hong Kong and strengthen political discipline within the military. The Hong Kong government has proposed raising the bond issuance ceiling for securing infrastructure development funds from the current 700 billion Hong Kong dollars to 900 billion Hong Kong dollars, approximately 115 billion US dollars. China's battery production capacity is expected to be 10 times that of the United States by 2025, with 19 companies planning to invest a total of 180 billion yuan, approximately 26.3 billion US dollars, to add 900 GWh of annual production capacity. President Xi Jinping emphasized the need to deepen political rectification in the military to maintain the purity of the People's Army at a training session for senior military officials. Next, here are the key stories from Japan. Japan's economy is moving in tandem with international developments, while domestic companies are making concrete moves. Inpex is considering reallocating Middle East investments to Southeast Asia. Subaru has announced a new EV, and Blackstone and others have applied for Tokyo Electric Power's Capital Alliance. Japan's largest oil and gas developer, Inpex, is considering reallocating part of its Middle East investments to Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc., due to delays in its UAE investment plan caused by military conflict in Iran. Subaru has started selling its new electric vehicle, EV, Trailseeker from 5.39 million yen. The driving range for the FWD model is 734 kilometers, and for the AWD model, it is 690 kilometers. Regarding the capital alliance sought by Tokyo Electric Power Holdings, U.S. funds Blackstone and Apollo Global Management, as well as SoftBank, have shown interest and applied, it was learned on the 9th. Next, here are the key stories from Asia-Oceania. In the Asia-Oceania region, China's AI microdramas raise copyright issues, and Hong Kong succeeds in attracting global talent. In India, regulations for child protection in the digital space are being considered, reflecting responses to technological innovation and social issues, as well as efforts to strengthen regional competitiveness. In China, AI-generated microdramas are gaining popularity, especially among young people, but concerns about copyright infringement and the impact on creators' livelihoods are growing. Hong Kong is strengthening its initiatives to attract global talent, ranking first in Asia and fourth globally in the IMD World Talent Ranking 2025, a significant jump from 9th place. The government of Andhra Pradesh, India, is preparing a comprehensive regulatory framework to protect children's safety in the digital space, including restrictions on social media access for children under 13 and the creation of age-appropriate online environments. Next, here are the key stories from South America. Uruguay's major energy investments, Brazil's temporary suspension of oil export taxes, and efforts to secure fertilizer supply following the Strait of Hormuz crisis are the prominent economic and energy trends today. QatarEnergy and Chevron have officially joined as non-operating partners in offshore hydrocarbon exploration blocks off the coast of Uruguay. QatarEnergy will participate in blocks OFF2 and OFF7, while Chevron will join block OFF7, with Shell continuing as the operator. The transaction was completed on March 25. A federal judge in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, issued a preliminary injunction suspending the 12% crude oil export tax imposed on 5 international oil companies: Shell, Total Energies, Equinor, Repsol Sinopec, Petrogal. This tax had been in effect since March 12. In response to logistical disruptions and price volatility caused by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, IICA, and the Fertilizer Institute, TFI, have announced a joint plan to secure fertilizer supply across the Americas. That concludes today's Global News Report. Have a great day. Thank you for watching.